Walpurgis is back, and dear God, Kim Ji-hoon wants to make money this go-around. I mean, I get it, he's gotta pay for those employee mortgages somehow. But between putting Dawn back in the spotlight and choosing one of the most popular and, let's say, marketing-friendly abnormalities to put on display, they really want us to know they mean business with this new update. So, considering the occasion, and the fact y'all really liked it when I made a Walp drop breakdown on the second channel, I'm breaking down what the new Queen of Hatred and Knight of Despair drops have in store for us. Sure hope you like playing with bipolar disorder. And if you're one of my viewers that has it IRL, I don't know, man, the funny subscribe button's right there. If you click it, I'll ask how you're doing in a later video, how's that? Starting off with Dawn, since she has both the main ID and ego coming out in a single update, we've got In the Name of Love and Hate, which I'll just call QOH for my own sake. Now, at first glance, this ID makes use of charge, sinking, and rupture, but in practice, it's more of a charge ID with some sinking and rupture accessories on top. Both of these IDs come with a unique charge, and Dawn's is called Love and Hate. Like with the ID, I'm just gonna call it Love Charge. Now, aside from her unique charge, the main status you'll want to keep an eye on is Magical Arcana. This sucker is the crux of the ID and controls her phase change mechanic. It can stack up to 3 and causes Dawn's skills to do more damage, but when the turn ends and she has a certain amount, likely 3, her SP is set to a flat value. While there's always some guesswork when it comes to analyzing IDs based on these sheets, I feel like this value has to be somewhere between -15 and -30 SP. I'll go into why a bit later, but it's in part because of her main passive called In the Name of Love and Hate.
Alert! Ego piercing threshold exceeded!
Among other effects, this passive causes Dawn's kit to change to either being a positive coin kit at 0 or positive SP, and a negative coin kit at negative SP with respective statuses to match. And while her negative skills will cost her SP on use, don't worry about accidentally corroding with them, they accounted for that. But due to this passive alone, you're usually gonna start off with the positive coin kit and move on to the negative one later in the fight. The positive kit also inflicts rupture, while the negative inflicts sinking, although again, I wouldn't suggest treating this as great support for either team unless the numbers are incredibly high. And for those who aren't convinced that these are plus and minus kits, you can usually tell a skill is a plus coin skill if it gains coin power, and a minus coin skill if it only gains base, clash, or final power. So digging into the positive kit, all 3 skills will cause her to gain love charge count, while the skill 1 and skill 2 will spend it for coin power. Funnily enough, the skill 3 does not spend love charge at all, and instead deals more damage based on how much is spent in the encounter, and gains base power based on how much love charge potency she has. So like all modern charge units, she gains potency based on how much charge she spent. The skill also has unbreakable coins, even if they don't apply rupture on crack. Aside from that, there are 3 noteworthy aspects to this positive kit. The first is that it applies rupture, but notably not rupture count. So even though this is in the 25% of IDs that involve rupture, it's still in the vast majority that do virtually nothing for it. Second, both her native and alt skill 2 will inflict Mark of Villainy against the target next turn. And this status has the simple effect of the victim taking more damage from Don Quixote and only affects the first enemy inflicted. It's not fancy, but it's on brand for the Abno. And lastly, none of these skills cause Don Quixote to lose SP. Now, why is that important? Because without that, there's no native way for Dawn to go into the SP negatives and get access to the other half of her kit. Now, it's possible she could be a sore loser ID like Barbarotis and lose SP when losing clashes, but since her skill 3 and the Magical Girl passive cause her to gain Magical Arcana, this is why I feel confident that the Magical Arcana effect will drop her into the negatives. Not as far as -44 or 45, since that would basically guarantee a corrosion, but somewhere between -15 to 30 will allow her to still make use of the kit. Speaking of, this kit comes with its own special resource. Good ol' Hysteria. This is a status Dawn technically gets when the battle starts, but can be easily lost fast since it loses a stack when it's 0 or higher SP, and only gains stacks at negative SP. Like Magical Arcana, it caps out at 3, but is mainly used by the negative kit. On that note, the negative kit works in a similar way to the positive one in that most moves will cause Dawn to gain more love charge count on use, minus the skill 3. The skill 2 also inflicts Mark of Villainy in the same manner as its counterpart, and aside from inflicting sinking instead of rupture, the coin effects are essentially the same. In contrast though, all 3 moves will cause Dawn to lose SP, gain either base or clash power based on the Hysteria value, and in the case of the S2 and S3, gain attack weight. The skill 2 gains attack weight based on Hysteria alone, while the skill 3 gains it by consuming both Hysteria and Magical Arcana. Now that attack weight ain't as impressive as you might think, since the sub-targets are going to take less damage than the main target. It's an odd choice, but I guess they really want to make her act like she's a hater to one enemy in particular like the original Abno did. And that's especially the case with the skill 3, since it'll transform that attack weight into more damage if there's only a single target. Oh, and don't get too comfortable with those unbreakable coins. Those suckers are losing base power alongside coin power if you lose the clash. Notice how it gains attack weight by specifically consuming Hysteria and Magical Arcana. This is the only skill in Dawn's kit that allows you to get rid of Magical Arcana, and therefore the only way to stop her SP from being set to a certain amount at turn end. This means that until you make use of the negative skill 3, she's gonna be stuck in that state for the rest of the fight. But if you use that move, she'll also gain more SP at the end of the turn. While we don't know the exact numbers yet, I imagine this will bring her back to anywhere from 15 to minus 15 SP, so she's got a good chance of getting back to the positive kit. Then there's her defensive skill. Rapid Chant is an unbreakable and clashable guard that'll get more base power based on the amount of Hysteria she's got, and give you more love charge count to boot. Assuming it's a plus coin, this is a pretty balanced guard that's decent to use whether or not she's in positive or negative mode. And finally, the support passive works like Magical Girl Charge Soda. No, I'm not joking. The ally with the least charge count will get an extra one when it uses a skill to gain more, and will also heal SP or HP based on their charge potency. SP comes in the negative SP range, and HP comes in the 0+ range. Just like Soda, go figure. But know that this specifically is based on charge potency and not count, so the healing effect is only for the more modern charge IDs above all else. Altogether, this ID plays a lot like Philclair mixed with Enclair and then somehow turned into a charge unit. The phase change mechanic is something you have some control over, and based on the skill 3s, the alt phase appears to be the more powerful of the two. However, SP management is still necessary to some degree even if she can't corrode from using the skills. And as you shift between the phases, Dawn will get increasingly more powerful since all of her attacks will deal more damage as she gets love charge potency throughout the fight. So even if she does have Rupture and Sinking in the kit, you're only gonna care about those for the Mirror Dungeon. But wait, we haven't even gotten to the ego yet. In the name of love and hate, Don Quixote is an Envy Vav ego that has 2 unbreakable coins on both the Awakening and Corrosion. The Awakening applies a custom buff to allies called Magical Girl's Chant, which increases attack and damage up to the user. In addition, if the unit is a charge ID, its moves that gain or spend charge count get a final power and damage buff. Really hammering home that, yeah, Queen of Hatred is charge support. The buff also applies to more allies based on the Envy resonance, meaning that the middle may have fun with this ego too. If I had to guess, the base amount it applies is 1/3 of the resin by default and half the resin if she has her positive SP status. I say that cause this would allow her in the current season to apply this to up to 3 allies, and that matches the size of the 4 Magical Girl team we've seen in PM up to now. The move also gains attack weight based on the amount of charge or love charge potency she has, and gets even more in the positive SP state. And the coins will give her more charge and love charge count, inflict Mark of Villainy for the next turn, and inflict Rupture. Following the trend, she'll also inflict Rupture count in the positive SP state. Come on though, I know we can all dream, but I ain't holding my breath on that count mattering. Most importantly though, this Awakening will consume all of the charge count on Dawn and use it to heal allies based on the amount consumed. This not only means Charge has a new way to get sustainable healing with the amount of love charge Dawn's skills generate, but also helps her scale and rapidly gain charge potency if it's used when she's at max value. Considering that this move also gives her another stack of Magical Arcana, using this while at max love charge status is a great way to prime a powerful alt skill 3 in the coming turns. And if that wasn't enough, the ego's passive leans even harder into that strat. Not only will it make Dawn deal more damage with more charge potency, but it'll throw an additional skill 3 use into her kit, making it more likely to appear reliably and let her phase change more often. In other words, this ego gives her more access to her strongest skills and help her scale significantly faster than the ID alone. Now that said, I ain't as excited about the corrosion. Like most ego corrosions, they work as a more aggressive form of the awakening. Instead of healing allies afterward, this move consumes all charge count to deal more damage. Instead of applying an ally buff by envy resin, it deals more damage. However, it still gains more attack weight by the charge or love charge potency, and gains even more in the negative SP state. Fittingly, it also inflicts sinking on its coins, and if you're in that good old negative SP state, it'll also inflict sinking count. Both moves will also inflict Mark of Villainy, but I'd consider the corrosion more fitting for solos and the awakening better for team fights. So, if we take both the ID and ego's qualities into account, this loadout is fantastic for charge, a good support for envy resin builds, stronger in single enemy fights based on the Mark of Villainy and single enemy damage buffs, scales well with long fights, but should only be considered for rupture and sinking for mirror dungeon buffs rather than potent support. But I'll give an honorable mention to the ego for helping W Corp Don better scale for the modern day charge strats. If you're looking to up your charge or envy game, or just want a unit that's likely got good power and a cycle that makes you focus a little on managing, or if you're just a really big fan of the Queen of Hatred, then yeah, it's worth pulling for. But let's not count out the walking inferiority complex just yet. Now, I may be biased towards Rodion, but if you're looking for some really flexible sinking support, this is shaping up to be a phenomenal ID. The Sword Sharpened with Tears Rodion, or Knight of Despair Roja for short, is an ID that mirrors Queen Dawn in a few ways. She's got her own positive and negative coin kits based on her SP with a Blessing in Despair status to match, her own unique charge in the form of Deep Tears, and a whopping 4 passives on deck. Unlike Dawn's unique charge though, Deep Tears has a fixed potency, meaning it's not meant to scale like a modern charge unit. Instead, this ID is like a cross between Lantern Yi Song, Zwei Ishmael, and good old Potential Man. I know that's not the most convincing comparison at first glance, but you will see what I mean soon enough. For one, her Blessing and Despair forms aren't just ways to decide what kit she uses. Both of these statuses give her significant buffs. Blessing will inflict sinking with any enemy that clashes with Roja, and inflict more if they manage to hit her. The effect also gets more potent the higher her SP is. In addition, Blessing gives her the Protecting Sword buff based on her SP, which applies defense level up and aggro with every stack. It goes up to 5 and is removed at the turn end, meaning the value updates every turn to reflect her current SP. In addition, the Magical Girl passive gives Rodion a flat % damage reduction based on her SP, protection based on the amount of protecting sword she has, and even more protection and clash power up if you've got a lot of it. Put all these together and you've got a kit that wants high SP to gain aggro, tank like a champ, inflicts sinking to enemies on clash and when hit, and gains clash power. Before we even get into the skills, this unit already has the makings of a sinking Zwei Ishmael. And yes, she's got a clashable guard too, but you might not want to use that one so quickly. As for why, let's talk about her skills. All 3 of her skills share 2 traits in common. They gain coin power based on the target's sinking, and clash power based on protecting sword. The S1 and S2 also give her Deep Tears on hit, while the S3 consumes them, similar to any charge unit. The skill 3 is pretty typical in that regard too, dealing more damage for every Deep Tears it consumes, and getting base power. Both of her skill 3s even regenerate her Deep Tears if the move kills the enemy it hits, so it can sustain for a good while. However, there's one note on the skill 3 that makes me really like this unit. The final coin makes use of a buff called Tears Sharpened to deal more damage. Tears Sharpened is a buff that caps out at 3, generates Deep Tears every turn, and creates more if it's at the max stack. It also increases the damage of her base attack skills, and in the Blessing form, increases Roja's clash power all the more. However, Roja will lose SP based on the stack at the end of every turn. Based on what we've discussed about the IDs so far, there is no way Tears Sharpened can be generated using the positive ID kit's attack skills, and works antithetically to its need for high SP. This means that everything I've told you about this ID up to now is the case only if you like win rating and keeping that SP high. But if you're willing to edge your mental health and bring that SP in the negatives, the Clashable Guard's got something special for you. The Knight's Faith is an unbreakable clashable guard that gains coin power based on protecting sword, generates Deep Tears, and generates shield based on Rodion's SP. It also transforms some of that SP into Tears Sharpened, and when used repeatedly can increase the stack further at the cost of greater SP. Considering that you can use this sucker on command, throwing this out at the start of a fight is a good way to move the ID into the Despair state and access her more volatile negative kit. This kit revolves around the Despair status, which acts as a counterpart to Blessing. Instead of inflicting sinking after a clash and when Roja's hit, Despair inflicts sinking count after a clash and on the first hit Roja makes after every clash. Like Blessing, this application is buffed based on the SP. The status also generates Piercing Sword, which is the counterpart for Protecting Swords. These will give her offense level up and remove her aggro based on the stack, making it more likely for her to make unopposed attacks and clash less often. Her Magical Girl passive will also increase the damage by a flat rate based on the SP, and give her damage and power up based on the amount of Piercing Sword she has. Unlike the Blessing state though, the Despair state has a passive all its own: Break, Tear, and Pierce. This passive will consume the Piercing Sword to inflict more sinking, and even try to use it all if you have a large stack. Considering that the sword buffs are decided when or before combat starts, and the fact you regenerate Piercing Sword every turn, there's like no downside to spending them this way. Most importantly, if Roja has a full stack of Tear Sharpened, she can consume all of it to deal a major blow of sinking potency and count to an enemy, deal extra damage, and heal her SP back into the positives to get her out of that Despair state. So with that in mind, we can see this as an ID that can stay in its positive state as long as it wants to for defense and clash power, and then spend some time in that negative state for offense, sinking application, and more damage. And the kit matches that. Like with Dawn's kit, all three of Roja's Despair skills cause her to lose SP on use. They also all inflict sinking, with the skill 2 and 3 inflicting count, making it a more stable sinking ID when compared with the count application from Despair itself. Instead of clash power, all of the moves gain final power to reflect the change to minus coins. The skill 1 and skill 2 will help with generating more deep tears the more swords Rodion has. The skill 2 and skill 3 consume deep tears to apply more damage, and the skill 3 will also gain base power for its trouble too. But the highlight here is the coin effect on the skill 3. If it consumes Tear Sharpened, then the final coin is reused once. Now, coin reuse effects might not be as potent with minus coin moves, but the fact that this copies the sinking potency and count application still makes this the featured move of the ID, and helps her transition back into the Blessing mode afterward. You'll also have an easier time staying at low SP due to the lack of aggro, and won't have to worry about corroding because of Rodion's Whispers of the Betrayed Knight passive. This sucker stops her from going below minus 40 SP from her own skills, allies' passives, or ally deaths. There's even a one-time corrosion bailout effect that stops her from going to minus 45, cause she may be depressed, but she's at least functionally unwell. Rounding out the kit, there's her Unbreakable Clashable counter, which generates deep tears, gives her more final power for every piercing sword, inflicts sinking on hit, and will help you generate that sweet, sweet Tear Sharpened at the end of the turn. In total, this means that the Despair state works kinda like a Hey Show Otis in that it leans more into unopposed attacks and pure damage, rather than wanting to be involved in clashes at all. Despair and Tear Sharpened will still inflict sinking count on clash and give you that extra pierce power up respectively, but I'd call that more like insurance to keep Rodion from being defenseless in this state, since those minus coins may leave her with a hard time getting over enemies. And who knows though, if the moves are as powerful as Wild Hunt Heath's skill 4, you could have every reason to make Rhyme Shank as fast as possible and get in there. This ID does fuel it on its own after all. Overall though, this is a more controlled ID than Dawn's that can be as defensive as long as you want it to, and then shift into kill mode when you're ready for her to make a single blow without being noticed. You know, just like the spiteful ignored child that she is. I'd call this an ID that benefits from charge support more than fueling it. This sucker's playing for sinking, it's no contest. But hey, I could be wrong. We won't know for sure until Walp comes out. And if you want to be certain, make sure to join me when I stream the update once it goes live and see if Pity's enough to get all 3 drops. Cause there ain't no way I'm missing out on one of the few Roja IDs that looks as miserable as she truly is. And as always, thanks to all my patrons and members that support me. You'll hear me say this a lot over the next month, but I'm starting to focus more on YouTube as a career now. And any support from YouTube members, or especially patrons on the Patreon, helps out significantly significantly. Because of that, I'm adding more perks for y'all too, like this Q&A section at the end of every video. What are your favorite games beside PM stuff, if any? These days, my work schedule keeps me busy enough that I don't really play a lot of games outside of PM, but on the rare chance I get to, I'm really enjoying Hades 2, especially with the new updates. I've also always liked Deltarune and Mario Party, and I might have an excuse to stream those sometime later this year. Fingers crossed. In your opinion, which sinner would have gotten the Gold Rush ID and Ego, and why? If we're talking IDs, then probably Gregor. If we're talking ego, I'd say Merceau. I think Gregor represents the King of Greed better, not only with the whole gluttony affiliation a lot of his IDs have, but the fact that it also talks about just the plain act of wanting leading to dire consequences. The LobCorp story also references the Garden of Eden and, the apple that got him kicked out, so that could be some funny symbolism. Merceau for the ego just because big fist, and I think it would be harder to justify him getting an ID for it. If you could have any one ego, what would it be? Easy answer, lifetime stew. I could go in my bathroom, inside the bathtub or shower, use that sucker with a pot in hand, and I'd have dinner for like a week. A lot of people are gonna come up with ego because they want to say it's like useful in combat or some shit like that, but dude, high pressure soup is gonna be so useful for your day to day, and also as a weapon gonna weird people out enough they're gonna run away from you anyway. There's no contest. If I had to talk about a manifested ego though, put the Mountain of Smiling Body's mouth on my bat, I don't know. That feels right at home.